8 is about a month away, and I thought I'd just give some thoughts on it before it actually comes out, just because I've been so excited for it for like the last 3 weeks. I literally haven't been able to shut up about it to my friends, so I thought maybe like if I put all my thoughts down on paper, which is here, and also on camera, that would be calming. We'll get it out of my head at least. I don't know if it's going to derail this hype train just yet. To be perfectly honest, whenever the trailer was announced, I wasn't super hype. I didn't really, just like, yeah, whatever, pass me by. It could have been because I was like on a Batman band and I didn't really care for it, or it could have been just any number of things. I don't know. Just wasn't that fascinated. I don't really care for Ethan, to be perfectly honest. He's kind of dumb. I love Mia. No idea why. Just love Mia. She's great. And I love that Ethan is such a good husband for Mia. Like, truthfully, if it were any one of us, let's be real, we would have hopped the fence and not stopped till we got to the Louisiana border. Let's be real. But he does all this for her because he loves her, because he's a good husband. Anyway, getting back on track. The more that I see of the trailer, the more hype that I get, because I'm a lore fiend. To be perfectly honest, I love lore. But just in general, it doesn't necessarily have to be about Resident Evil, but because we're talking about Resident Evil lore, and it's gotten to the point where I just can't stop thinking about it at all. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the trailer, just for like a little bit, or trailers I should say. Honestly, when the first trailer came out, didn't care for it the first time I saw it at all. I watched it and reviewed it for, I can't remember if it was Capcom or the Ambassador program that sent me an email like a week or two after it came out, like asking what do you think of this as one of our ambassadors. So it must have been the Ambassador program, yeah. So I gave my feedback on it. I think my main gripe was the fact that it had been announced for both PS4 and PS5, but after that they said no, it's only coming to PS5, and I think I was justifiably angry about that, because I got excited thinking that it was for PS4. Now obviously that's changed again, it is for PS4, but my main complaint was that they said it was only going to be for PS5 because of the improved graphics. So my counterpoint to that was, well, Silent Hill did what you guys are doing with the snow in 1999, and it was still scary as all hell. Why can't you do something like that? You don't need, you know, all these graphics to seem scary. I mean, it certainly helps, but, you know, it's not necessary. It's not what I'm here for. But obviously a compromise has been reached, it's been changed, so don't really have that much more to complain about on that front, even if picking out things apart like this is like my favourite hobby. So yeah, let's start off on a positive note. The announcement trailer took a while to get to me, mostly because I wasn't invested in Resident Evil at the time, wasn't really paying attention. Finally I got that email, as I mentioned, and I watched it, and I wasn't thrilled, but I guess time's kind of sweetened me towards it, because I have been like paying more and more attention to it and been watching other people's like lore review videos and stuff like that. So yeah, it's gotten better as I've watched it over and over again. I think my favourite bit was the narration by Mia. I really liked the use of the fairy tale as like a framing device for the rest of everything that's happening like later in the trailer, and also what's going to be happening in the game when we finally get our hands on it. The game, if you don't know, is basically all fairy tale monsters. Now they're going to be grounded in the reality that is sort of the pseudoscience of Resident Evil, so like all the virus stuff, there's going to be a logical explanation for everything that we see within the context of Resident Evil. So it's not just like, oh, there's werewolves here now just because werewolves are suddenly something that exists in the Resident Evil world. It'll be, oh, there's werewolves here now because that's what the virus does to them, sort of, if you're with me. I really liked the narration over top of things, and I also really liked the second version of the narration where it's like a little, not quite paper, not quite claymation, sort of, it reminded me of Coraline, the animation, of that little girl running through the forest doing what Mia's saying. So that was really cool. Really liked that. Excuse me. Even from what little we saw, like the cartoon sort of animation and then the gameplay animation, the visuals look really good. They've clearly improved on the RE engine since RE7, and the RE engine in RE7 was already pretty spectacular. I have to imagine they've been working on it pretty much constantly since then, because they've used it for... Did they use it for RE2? They definitely used it for RE2, and RE3. I don't know about Resistance. I have to think so, because it's the same sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Same sort of style and same sort of GUI and interface. So obviously they've been using it constantly. Like, when did Resident Evil 7 come out? 2017? So that's 4 years they've had to polish it. I mean, it always did look pretty good, but now it looks like spectacular. So I was pretty shocked to see Mia and Ethan. But it makes logical sense. Because Resident Evil 7 was like a reboot for the series, like a full hard reboot. So it wouldn't make any kind of sense, even for a Resident Evil game, to like get rid of them after you've literally just started with them. Like, I know we've had one-shot characters before, like that guy from Dead Aim, but still, for Resident Evil 7 to be so, like, popular, and what's the phrase I'm looking for? Important in the canon, like, it's a whole new set of things. It just, it doesn't make any kind of sense, even for a Resident Evil game, to get rid of the characters after one game, especially a main character like Ethan. Like, I can maybe see, like, Alexia from Code Veronica. Haven't seen her since. Obviously she's dead, but irrelevant. Doesn't make sense for her to come back. Does make sense for Claire, who was in that game, to have more games. So I would like to think we keep an Ethan and Mia around for a little while. Obviously, as a Mia fan, I'm quite happy to see her, and I was even happier to see now that they have a little baby. The child, I think, is called Rosemary. And although I'm a little bit mad they didn't call her like some sort of snow or winter themed pun, I'm really interested to see where they're going with all this. Obviously, she's a little girl in a horror game, and little spooky girls are some of the most powerful things in horror games, although I don't think we've ever seen one that's like baby sized. Even Evelyn, I think she was about 3 or 4, even though she was aged to like 10. She was still, you know, she wasn't a baby. She was capable of acting on her own and having agency, whereas a baby's just sort of there. So I'm interested in seeing where they're going with all this. Like, do you think Mia's child and Mia, I suppose, sorry, I got tongue-tied there, do you think they're going to be the new main characters after all of this? Because, I mean, Ethan's been in 2 games now. Even if they aged him forward a little bit, be getting kind of old, and they've already done the rescue angle, so it's not like they can get a little bit older and then have Rosemary be abducted again. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. So, speaking of Ethan, there's quite a lot of stories in the world that are like this Resident Evil 1, but I don't mean like exactly the same. I mean men fighting for their families and for fighting for revenge for their families because something has happened, like their wife's been murdered. Like, the murdered wife thing is like a really popular trope. Like, muscle-bound guys, like, gun-toting, running into madness just to get back what's theirs. I'm a little bit jaded towards this sort of story. Like, it's just sort of boring to me. What I liked about this version of the story is it seems more like a heartfelt rescue. To me, I don't want to sound sexist or like I'm promoting some sort of stereotypes, but emotional rescue things come across to me more as like a woman's story. Not that I necessarily support that, it's just that I see more of that in games. It's all about women, you know, trying to help other people, but trying to rescue hostages or people who've been kidnapped, things like that. That feels like more like an emotional story from a woman's perspective, if that makes any kind of sense. So I'm interested to see where they're going with it with Ethan. Like, the wiki itself describes Ethan as a normal, boring person. He's not, you know, super smart like Wesker, he's not super strong like Chris, he's not super charming like Leon, he's just this regular nobody that's been dragged into this through, you know, no fault of his own, and the only thing that's really driving him, and that has been driving him, is just love. He was driven by love to see Mia again, even though he knew she'd done something wrong, and even though he was going through hell and getting limbs chopped off. Like, can you think of anybody else who wouldn't be like, right, you know what, I'm out of here? It's just good. I just want to see, like, a father's love pushing the story this time around, because I can't really think of any other stories that have done this, especially not in a horror sense. Like, maybe Heavy Rain? It's kind of a horror story. Like Saw. I haven't played Heavy Rain, I have to confess. I'm not a big fan of walking simulators. But it feels different this time, and that's what I'm excited for. I really want to see where they're going with all this. Whenever man gets his family back comes to mind, it's always revenge or vengeance, and although Ethan seems rightfully very angry, particularly at Chris, he doesn't seem like this is all about him and how he feels. It's about getting his kid back. It's about protecting his family, basically. And I just want to see things from a man's perspective on that for a change. Obviously, I'm not a man, so I wouldn't know. I don't have kids, but I'm just excited for it. Basically, is the point that I'm trying to get across in a slightly rambly way. This, I suppose, kind of talking about Ethan's perspective. Obviously, the game is told from Ethan's perspective. It kind of brings me back to all the story I've been able to glean from the trailers. From what I can put together and what I've seen from other people's lore videos is Rosemary Winter seems to be like the driving force behind the story. So I said she doesn't really have any agency. Obviously she's a baby, she can't do anything. She's more of a plot device, for now at least anyway. She was abducted at what I think was Chris's behest. Sorry, not Chris's behest. By Chris at the behest of either Alcina or this Mother Miranda person for some unknown reason. Clearly the story is inspired by fairy tales. There's been a map released with werewolves, vampires, what looks like some sort of ant creature, and also maybe some sort of like creature from the Black Lagoon mermaid thing on it. So obviously it's inspired by fairy tales. Capcom is leaning into the supernatural thing, sort of pushing more towards like spooky ghosts and cults, the way they did a little bit in RE4, but would have done more in the cancelled version of RE4. Now obviously as a horror fan I'm really excited to see more spooky supernatural stuff, but I'm hoping what they're doing isn't just purely supernatural. What I'm envisioning for the story whenever I heard about it is Rosemary's been taken because of the quality of her blood maybe. Both Mia and Ethan were infected with the mole, so it stands to logic that Rosemary is infected with the mole in some way, shape or form, or has some sort of immunity to it because of her blood. Perhaps the vampire lady Alcina or Mother Miranda want her blood to control the mold, or maybe make a new virus. This is all speculation. I don't have any confirmation on this. It's just what I've been thinking about from viewing the trailers and seeing all the baby symbols everywhere as part of the cult. So obviously a child's really important to the cult. It sounds great in theory. What I would like to see is more of what was cancelled in the Resident Evil 4 beta years and years and years ago, before it came out first. Not like the remix one, the very very first version that came out in what, 2005? Maybe? Earlier than that? I'm not sure. I would love to see a blend of sciencey things and supernatural-y things, because I love that kind of stuff. If you know me at all, you know I love a good bit of lore and some good spooky shit. So, yeah. TLDR, Rosemary's been abducted for some sort of potential sacrifice or potential science experiment, and I can't wait to see where it goes with that. So let's talk about the monsters. So after RE7, I'm kind of itching for some new monsters. The zombies to me aren't that scary. Like, I am terrified of zombies, really. I have nightmares about zombies and zombie apocalypse all the time. It makes you wonder why I love zombie games so much. But they're only really truly frightening to me while I'm awake if they jump scare me. Now, admittedly, that's quite a lot because I don't have very good eyesight or self-awareness, and I'm usually listening to music while I'm playing games, just because that's what I like to do. So I don't have my headphones in and I can't hear, you know, the surround sound of the game to know when there's something behind me. Whenever they get me, it's like, it's not like blind terror. Like, sometimes I'll jump and I'll press the start button and I'll pause the game. Like, if you watch my streams and you see that I've been attacked by a monster, it has always jump scared me, and then I have paused immediately after to like but that kind of fear doesn't really stay with me, is what I mean. It gives me heart palpitations and like a momentary like burst of and then so like it's annoying, but it's also funny. But that's not really what you want from a horror game. Like, you want to be scared. I know I want to be scared. I want to be like freaked out by noises even after I stop playing the game. Don't know why. I don't like being scared, but I want to be scared. What I've seen of the trailer is, or rather one of the devs talking, is that, no, it was a trailer. It was the devs talking in one of the trailers. They said that every enemy type in the game is now going to have a different way of fighting. So if you remember the mold, there was three main types in the main game. So there was the little skittery spider ones, there was the normal mold, and then there was the fat molded who like vomited, and I don't like vomit. I don't like anything that vomits on me. There was two more, I think, possibly three more in the Not a Hero DLC, but I haven't actually played that yet because I don't really like Chris. So let's just say there was three enemy types, and they did fight a little bit differently, but they could all just be attacked with a shotgun, and that wasn't enough for me. Like, it was enough to get me through the game, thankfully, because I usually play these games on easy, although, fun time, I have actually platinumed Resident Evil 3. I've beat it on Nightmare mode. Took about 3 hours. I've S ranked it as well, but I had to like keep reloading a save to try and get through it. So sorry, tangent over. Back onto the monsters. I was talking about how they, meaning the devs, have all given all of the enemies different AI, so that they all fight differently and they'll have to be tackled differently in a different way. And this makes me really happy. Like, it thrills me to my little black core. I cannot wait for upgrades to the monsters' AI. Like, even going as far back as the zombies, like, they haven't really evolved very much since Resident Evil 1. If we're being totally fair. Maybe in, like, Resident Evil 5 and 6 they got a little bit smarter, but they wouldn't, like, work in teams. They wouldn't, like, try and flank you or anything, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Just sign me up for intelligent monsters. I want to be outsmarted by alliance of ones and zeros. Again, admittedly not particularly difficult, but I want to see what you've got. Sounds like I'm being a wee bit sarcastic about being outsmarted by the ones and zeros, but I am genuinely excited for the big furry boys, the werewolves, because that's what they said about, that's when the devs said that they were going to have something different, whenever they mentioned the fact that every enemy type fights differently. So, fingers crossed it's as good as I'm hoping for, because we all know what games like this are like for AI. Like, they all sound good on paper, and then they're like dumb as a block of cheese whenever you actually get into the game. So, fingers crossed. I suppose I can't really talk about monsters in this game without mentioning the big vampire lady, Alcina Dimitrescu. She's okay. She's just okay. Don't attack me in the comments. I like the look of her. She looks cool. We haven't seen a female tyrant before, which is really interesting. I love games where the women are like front and center, because there's just not enough of them. That she's all over all the marketing. There was even a girl today, as I was recording this, she posted on Instagram a video of her cosplaying as Alcina. It's this Russian basketball Olympian. She's like nearly 7 foot tall, and she was cosplaying as her, and it was just perfect. But yes, back onto the actual vampire lady. She looks good, and I hope that she lives up to the hype, because she's all over everything. I don't want to be disappointed by a one-shot boss that goes down with like a couple of bullets and a handful of stern words after she's been in so much of the marketing. Like, I want her to be, if not the final boss, like a major boss. Like, you can't fight her right now, you have to leg it. Like, what would spring to mind, maybe? The Ubermorph from Dead Space. It like chases you for most of the game in different chapters. Like, you know, if you played it a couple of times, that you're safe, but you can't kill it until like nearly the very end, and you have to completely obliterate it. You can't fight it. You have to like fry it to death with the environment. I would like something like that. Like, you're so powerless against this giant vampire lady, there's nothing you can do except for whenever you're literally given no other option. So I hope she lives to the hype, and I would also really like to see her go full monster. Like, full disgusting pustules, all like tentacles coming out of her head, just to like separate the men from the boys, and see who still finds her hot at the end. I'm totally kidding. No, I'm not. I'm dead serious. Enough of the sexy vampires. Speaking of vampires, I should probably mention those Nosferatu living dudes, or dudettes, I suppose, that you see in the dungeon in the second or third trailer. Some of them have swords, I noticed, which I think is quite interesting. My theory is that they could be failed versions of the vampire brides, or the witches, I suppose as they're called, the ones that turn into flies. They're like failed versions of those, the ones that follow Alcina around, which means, theoretically, one of those monsters could be the woman that we've played as in, well, I obviously didn't get to play it because I don't have a PS5, but the woman that you play as in the Maiden trailer, like obviously she was killed at the end, but if she's been revived or she was a failed experiment, could it be one of those? Could she have transformed into one of those, left in the dark for, when is the Maiden trailer set? About 50 years before the start of the series? I'm kind of reaching. I could be wrong. Could just be some random villager that's been abducted recently, or it could be something different entirely. It's just kind of what I'm hoping for. I'm interested to see not only just their lore, but the fact that they have weapons this time around. I mentioned some of them have swords. If you watch carefully, when Ethan shoots one, it drops the sword. So, could we be getting melee weapons? That'll be interesting. Or even just zombies that can hold weapons is pretty interesting to me. Like, if you think about all the other zombies that have been in the series, they can't really do much more than bite you or like dribble down your ear. Like obviously there's specialised zombies that can do certain things, like the parasite zombies from Resident Evil 3. And they can whip you and they can like onto your face. Like a face, it's not very nice. But mostly they don't really do anything. It would be nice to have a zombie that can like kind of fight back, but in like a human sensible way. Like it could parry me if I come at it with a knife, or it like could block my hit with a sword. I don't know, I'm just reaching. I'm just excited to see them do something other than just stand there or come try and smooch me. I want to talk about the map for a wee minute. Now, I don't know if everybody has seen the map, but this isn't spoilers. You can see it at any time you want on the Wikipedia page or the official site of the game. I think you can also see it very, very, very briefly in one of the trailers. You can also see all of the house insignias in the trailers, so it's not like massive spoilers or anything. But it gives away quite a lot of detail, I think, possibly too much detail. We haven't seen all of the monsters, obviously. They're not going to like throw everything at us and like spoiler themselves. But as far as we know, there are now 4 houses to deal with in this story. And every single house has its own sort of monsters associated with it. The Demetrescu house, which is where the big vampire lady comes from, is obviously based around vampires. And possibly Dracula lore, like Alcina is Dracula in a sense, and the witches are her brides, not in like a literal sense, like the brides of Dracula. The other house that's been mentioned by name is House Heisenberg. There seems to be some sort of familial connection, can't talk, between all of the houses. Alcina refers to Heisenberg as her brother, but she does so in a very condescending way, so it's like he's beneath her in terms of house status. I'm not quite sure if there's like a hierarchy or if it's just because she lives in the castle and he lives in like a little workshop. But that one seems to be all based around werewolves. Someone did, I think it was Residents of Evil, did a video about him yesterday that I watched that likened him to, get it, werewolves, to a Romanian folkloric werewolf creature that could like transform at will and also commands loads of like smaller werewolves. So that seems to be what he's based on. The house that I think is pronounced Moreau, it's a French one, is set in a lake, or like I think it says the Moreau Reservoir on the map. So it seems to be like fish monsters or the rusalk creatures that I couldn't remember how to pronounce, or rusky. Again, I'll put the picture here or something. It seems to be fish monsters basically in there, which would make sense obviously because water, but it also seems to have some sort of connection to the island of Dr. Moreau. So I'm thinking maybe could it be a doctor who lives on the lake surrounded by like mermaids or fish people, and they're like experimenting on the villagers to see if they can make half human animal hybrids, because a lot of the creatures in this do seem to be half human half animal, like the weremen obviously. So maybe that. And then the one we know the least about is House Beneviento, and obviously Beneviento is Italian. I don't know a lot about Italian folklore, but they seem to be some sort of haunted forest or haunted trees. The little picture that I saw, it's like a Grim Reaper but with a wood theme, like a scythe. I don't know if there's any Italian or Romanian lore connecting to that. The only thing I could think of was an ent, you know, like from Lord of the Rings, or possibly some sort of Wendigo, a creature, or the Romanian equivalent. I'm not quite sure, but it looks cool. Like obviously we haven't seen everything yet, and everything is based on Romanian folklore. So if there's a tree beast out there, it'll probably be something along those lines. I also thought maybe could it be like the exact opposite? Like there's no beast whatsoever, it's just like a straight up haunted forest. Like I think it would be interesting to have a scary forest in what is essentially a rural village. Like it's the only way out, you have to go through the scary forest. And it could also tie back into the trailer of Mia talking about the scary forest. Maybe, I'm not sure, I just thought of that right now. It could be like, you know, the Korok forest in Breath of the Wild. I thought that would be interesting, although that was the most annoying section of that game, so maybe not. Maybe Capcom can do it a little bit better, I don't know. So yeah, speaking of all these families, it leads me into some of the lore that I kind of deduced, like just from that one little clip of the house family crest thing. Village seems to have a really strong family connection, and I don't just mean like all of the characters, I mean like the main theme seems to revolve around families. Like if you think, someone that I talked to has mentioned that maybe Chris is evil now because of the vampire lady threatening his family. Like maybe they've taken Jill or Claire or something. Maybe they've killed Jill or Claire, I don't know. So they've threatened his family. Alcina and her brother are part of the same family. They're both bad guys. There's like a big family controlling the village, and then obviously the other two families, so there's 4 of them now, and then the 4 of them are threatening Ethan's family. Like there's just a lot of family stuff going on, which it's quite interesting. It's not something we've seen before. We've seen like dynasties, I suppose, in the same way of the legacy of Umbrella, like Spencer and Marcus. Obviously they were 2 very powerful families. The Spencer estate spans, you know, multiple countries, very powerful family. The Weskers, they're not necessarily family, but they are related by name. More families. Like the more you think about it, the more it's like, yeah, it does kind of seem like they're culminating in something, dealing with all this family stuff. I don't know, just thought I'd throw it in there just while it's, you know, in my head before I forget. Last thing before I move on to the stuff that I wasn't as enthused about, shall we say. I already mentioned it, but the style of animations that they chose for Mia's little narration trailer, just loved it so much. It gave me warm, tingly feelings that reminded me of the opening of Resident Evil 7, you know, with Go Tell Aunt Rhody, which just bangs. I love that. I had that song as my ringtone for a little while. I don't know where it's gone now, it's not on my phone anymore. I think I might have deleted it, but I'm going to have to go and get it back because it just slaps. I really can't wait to see how they open Resident Evil 8 and to see if maybe they'll top Go Tell Aunt Rhody. It would be kind of hard to top Go Tell Aunt Rhody, but like, if anybody can, I feel like it's Capcom and whoever's in charge of Resident Evil 7 and 8. I don't know, I'm hopeful. Even if we just got like a little bit of the animation again in like, I don't know, not necessarily a different setting, but maybe just like a different scene from the story, or maybe have someone else narrate it. Or okay, now it's time to talk about the things I didn't like just so much. Chris shooting Mia. I probably should have clapped, but I already don't like Chris. I've made that abundantly clear. Every time I choose someone to play as a Resident Evil game, I go out of my way to avoid Chris. I know bullets sort of bother people infected by the mole about as much as like a gentle waft of air on a warm summer's day, but like, he still shot my girl Mia, and I'm not happy about it. I have never warmed to Chris, and this has just put me over the edge. In RE1, I always play as Jill because she's far superior. He was gone for 2, 3, and 4, and good riddance, I say. I always play as Sheva, and I always take the guns and ammo and literally everything off the AI partner and just give them a knife and just like, you go do your own thing. I don't want to know you. And I don't even want to get started on Resident Evil 6. I'm not over it. I'm not over what happened to Pierce, and I'm not over Chris being an alcoholic. Like, okay, fair enough, he had a trauma, and it's understandable, and I think that was the closest he ever came to being likeable, understandable, and relatable. And then I just threw it all away. Threw all my goodwill away when they murdered Pierce. And I'm not over it. I'm not okay. Never will be. I'm starting to worry this sounds like I don't actually like these games, which isn't true. I love these games with all my heart. Like, it's the 25th anniversary this year. I'm 25. I've essentially been with these games my entire life. Like, pretty much since the day I was born. My mum got my dad a PlayStation and Resident Evil 1 the year I was born, and he played it, and I was terrified of the zombie dogs, so he probably shouldn't have been letting me watch it, but I do remember being scared of them, so I never watched it, and I never played it until I was about... when did I start playing Resident Evil? It's gotta be good 10, 11, 12 years now, so I would have been 12, 13. I haven't put it down since. It's just been my favourite thing. It's also been like a really nice way to connect to my dad, because obviously he's a massive fan of it too. Hello Dad, if you're watching this, I'm finally using my new camera to record something decent. I love these games with all my heart. I just don't like Chris. I'm sorry, Chris fans. I really am. No, I'm not. One more narc at Chris before we leave, but the first line of the trailer has me slightly concerned. The first line of the announcement trailer, and this is the first bit of Resident Evil 8 that we see, says his story comes to an end. Now, spoiler alert, first of all, either Ethan's gonna die, which I don't think is likely. It could happen. I'm expecting it to happen, but I don't think it's likely. I won't be surprised if it happens, let's put it that way. Or Chris is gonna die, which I'm okay about. And the evidence for this is if you look at the half and half face, Chris is obviously turning into a wolf. Now this could be Chris just being the bad guy for a change. He's like a lone wolf. Rar. It could be something as simple as that. But I am kind of hoping it's getting rid of Chris and making way for someone new. Like, we haven't had a game with Jill in it since Resident Evil, in the canon timeline, since Resident Evil 5. And it's now... Resident Evil 5 was 2009, Resident Evil 6 was 2013, Resident Evil 7 was 2014, I think. And this one's maybe like anywhere between Resident Evil... anywhere between 2017 and 2021, I think. So, like 10, 11, 12 years in the canon timeline of Resident Evil without a Jill game. It's too long. I miss her. She was my favourite. That's just such a silly thing to say, but I feel like if that's the case, if they are going to kill one of those two characters off, like Ethan or Chris, I feel like you've given the game away. Now, keeping in mind, this is just things that have like irritated me just a little bit. I won't really like revolt and stop playing the games if you've killed a character off. I'm just like, why would you give the game away like that? What else did I not enjoy so much about the trailers? Don't at me, but I don't like the brides. I don't like the witch characters. They're obviously now inspired by Dracula, and there's 3 brides, like I've said that before. There's 2 brown ones and a blonde one, and that ties into Dracula and his 3 brides. The blonde one I think is the most powerful one. I had enough of bugs. I'm sorry, I just have Marguerite and her hive crotch live rent free in my brain, in my nightmares forever. My first thought about seeing Daniela, who is the blonde one, was I'm gonna have to burn this maggoty bitch. It does sort of fuel my mold theory, that the mold is gonna be the main virus, because obviously you can connect it really easily back to Marguerite, but like, just I don't want to see any more bugs at all. Right, we're nearly done. I'm just gonna talk about like 1 or 2 of the things that I'm hoping for in the game. I try not to have really high hopes based on trailers, because I find that's like a really quick way to be disappointed. I'm gonna stop waving this controller around. I just hope that the game is going to be good. I loved what I saw, but I'm trying to keep my hopes sort of general and unspecific. But I can't. Here's like a couple of like really minor things that I'm hoping for with this game. Just some things I would like to see, but aren't exactly a deal breaker for me if I don't get them. So I guess I'm just rambling. This is a hope for the game. Try this bit again. So my main hope really is that we don't have to focus on stealth. Stealth for me in a first-person view has never really worked. The only example I can think of is that it did sort of work is Deus Ex, and that worked because they pulled the camera back so that you could see all of Adam, and that was like one of the only times you got to see all of him was when you were crouched down looking around yourself in stealth mode. You also had things like cones of vision and a mini-map. Obviously we don't have that in Resident Evil. How's it going to work? I don't I don't like being punished or failed in a game for using the tools that the game has given me. So the Yiga Clan hideout from Breath of the Wild springs to mind. It's it took me forever to get through that bit. I hated it so much. Especially getting yeeted back to the start of the level and fail just for being spotted once and not being able to fight your way out of it. That really bothered me. I think it would be okay, it might work if you did like 1 or 2 sections like you did in Resident Evil 7 where you're just hiding from one enemy and they will despawn or ignore you if you leave the area, basically. I don't want it to be like Breath of the Wild. Now I know Breath of the Wild and Resident Evil aren't the same. Breath of the Wild is an RPG and Resident Evil is a resource management game. I think it could also work in terms of stealth if what you did was give us the option. So if you have, like in Resident Evil 7, if you have enough ammo, you can shoot Jack and he will stay down while you run around the area, or you can run and hide from him. Like, I think that should be an option. I don't want to be penalised because I'm fighting back in a game where I have a lot of guns and 90% of the time the way forward is to kill the things. Like, I think that would just be mind-bogglingly annoying. Running should be an option as much as standing your ground, and there should never be a section that forces you to be solely stealth. It's just, again, like Resident Evil 7, more of that. It was good. If you wanted to fight, you could. If you didn't want to fight, you could run. Small applause for Resident Evil 7. I'm gonna have to go soon because the sun is like right here, creeping into my line of vision, and I'm not gonna be able to see in a minute. But speaking of lights, please turn up the lights in this game. Please. I'm begging you. I don't want to have another problem like I did with Resistance. Full disclosure, I can't see very well. I've gotten new glasses. I don't know if you can see those. They have a nice little anti-reflective coating on them. I need these to play games. I know most of the game seems to take place during the day, which again is another thing I should have mentioned that I find interesting. Very few horror games take place during the day and are still genuinely scary, and I feel like this could be one of them. But I also see a lot of indoor bits, particularly the dungeon bits, which seems like you're going to need a torch. Give us a decent torch. I don't care if it's like a flashlight torch or like on a stick that's used for burning witches, which would be, you know, thematic, but I really need some sort of a light that I can see the game with. And I don't mean the same way that we have the option to adjust the brightness, because all that does is just make the darkness more grey than black, and that's not really useful to me. I want to be able to play this game. Give me some accessibility features, if nothing else, that I can tinker around with it and get it to a level that I can actually see. Please. I had such a gripe with this over Resident Evil Resistance, and then I wound up not playing very much of it, and I was kind of annoyed about it, to be honest, because I thought I was going to like the game a lot more than I did. But yeah, give me a light. Speaking of burning witches, the witches have got a lot of hype behind them, and that makes me a little bit nervous, because there's at least 4 of them, counting Alcina. She's a vampire, but you know what I mean. In the novel there's 4 brides, so it could be we haven't seen one yet, or someone else that we know gets turned into one, or maybe it's the maiden, maybe she's like a secret evil witch girl. But that means that's at least 4 boss fights with these characters. So Alcina and her 3 deputies. I don't think you can make them last the whole game. Given what I've seen of the map, they're going to be in the castle, unless they like spread out after you see them. I don't think the interest can be maintained in them for the whole game. Once you figure out the mystery of who they are and why they're like this, like we already know one of them's called Daniela, just have to find a note about Daniela and bam, mystery solved. It seems to me like you can't keep that up, the intrigue and the mystery and the ooh, maybe they're this, maybe they're that, for a whole game. Now I understand Resident Evil 7 was short and there wasn't much information about the bakers. Like you found a few notes, like Marguerite has a note from the doctors showing that she was getting infected with the mold over a period of time, and that sort of explained her, but it was one note and it didn't answer any of my questions except for, you know, seeing a few days before she went mad. I feel like this Resident Evil is going to be more in line with the typical ones, which are maybe 8 to 10 hours, if maybe hopefully longer. Like I don't want a really long game, I just want something that's, you know, a little bit longer than Resident Evil 7, and importantly replayable. And I feel like, again, the mystery would be lost if you had to replay it and all you had was these 4 witch characters, or well, 3 witch characters of vampire. So can you give me more about the witches, or alternatively give me less about the witches and cram them into a small area, so it's just intrigue and all about them in that one area, and then move on to something different. That could work. I feel like I'm starting to ramble, but you get my point, right? We're losing light here, or rather getting too much light, so we're going to make this quick. What I really want to see is more of Alex Wesker. We know from, I suppose this is kind of spoilers if you haven't played Resident Evil Revelations 2, but it's not old, or it's not a new game. It's old by Resident Evil standards, especially in the graphics department, and the first chapter was free, so maybe go play it. It's pretty good. That's your spoiler warning out of the way. If you haven't left, then, you know, on your own head be it. But at the end of Revelations 2, we learned that her mind transfer to Natalia Corda was actually successful. Now, we spent the whole game thinking that it wasn't, but it just took time. So, she's just out there being evil at the minute. She was, meaning the body, Natalia Corda, she was between 10 and 12 in Revelations 2, and this one is quite a few years later, so she's got to be like between 18 and 22, give or take. I'm really not good at math, I'm sure wildly overestimating that, but it's ample time for Alex to start her plans again and, you know, go places and do things and be bad. I really want to see them bring back Elaine Hendricks. She was my favourite version of Alex. Now, Mary Elizabeth McGlenn, who was the voice coach and director for Silent Hill until Team Silent disbanded, she did Alex's voice in the Resistance game, so she was just doing the voice lines, there was no acting involved. She was good, she was very Alex, but I just feel like, probably because Elaine Hendricks was her face model and her voice, it's just, I just see Elaine Hendricks when I look at her. I'm just hoping that they bring her back. I don't know in what capacity Alex could be in this game. Obviously she would be as Natalia, but would she still be a child, or would she make herself look older, or I don't know. I really, really want to see her because she's evil. She's definitely one of the worst, by which I mean like catastrophically bad in stories. She's just a force of nature. She's the baddest of the bad Resident Evil villains, but she's also one of the best Resident Evil villains, and I just really want to see more of her. I think I'm fairly justified in that. I think we haven't seen her at her full potential yet. Like, she turned into a spaghetti monster. Oh well. Wesker did that too. Show me something new. So, last but certainly not least in the character department, I just want to see my favourite French breadstick, Daniel Fabron. Now, I admitted earlier I did not like or play Resistance as much as I thought I would, but I love him. I spent ages trying to find all the voice lines for him. I'm just going to shimmy over this way a little bit. Just so I could listen to them, just because he was so funny. The main reason I didn't play Resistance wasn't because of anything wrong with the gameplay, it's just because I didn't have anybody to play with, and it all got really boring and repetitive trying to do stuff with strangers. If I had have had someone, I would have been playing as Daniel constantly. I'm desperate to see more of him. I just have to. I have it on good authority that the man that we see in the trailers, who looks a lot like Daniel, with the dark round circled glasses and the shaggy hair, it's not him, it's actually Heisenberg, Alcina's little brother. Even just seeing that, I'm thinking, oh, Daniel gave me a lot of hope. Having it taken away again is a little bit sad, but I really want to see him. I feel like he would fit in well. If Alex is in this game, I feel like he would be a good second choice, because we know that he works for her even back when Resistance took place. I can't see why you would put him in that and then not put him in anything else. Even if he's just in a few cutscenes as like Alex's punching bag, I would be happy with it. He's not going to last the rest of this game. Say on the off chance he is in the game, he's not going to last the full game. Like, we've seen what Alex does to her followers. Like, that dude, was his name Stuart in Revelations 2? He hung himself when he wasn't any more used to Alex. Like, obviously she's had fanatics now. Daniel seems very sarcastic, like he doesn't care about Alex really. He's working with her, but as he says, I am under obligation to work with Alex, but you are not, meaning the players or the survivors. He doesn't really care for her. He's not going to be the same sort of fanatic that the other ones were, so it would be a good dynamic between the two of them to have this like reluctant compatriot working for you, especially Daniel. He's so sarcastic and so funny. I'm gonna stop rambling about him now because this isn't a Daniel-centric video. Okay, I think I've calmed down from my little Daniel rant. I finally got all of my thoughts out of my head. I came up with a few more while I was sitting recording, just tried to jam them in there. Probably had to re-record way more times than really necessary to get everything in, but yeah. All of these thoughts have been in my head for like the last 3 weeks, like bouncing about my empty noggin like a I don't know, a gumball in a fishbowl. I literally haven't been able to sleep some nights because I've just been like overanalyzing and overthinking things, so I'm really hoping that getting that outside of my head and onto a camera or something like that will finally let me sleep and calm down. I haven't done anything else about it. Anything except for Resident Evil for about 3 weeks now. My Riddler blog is like gathering dust on the sidelines, and I have been just drawing and redrawing my OCs over and over again, and I even, as I mentioned, dragged my poor friend Natalie into this. She's writing a fic at the minute. She might actually, she has sent me a few messages just to tell me how it's going. She's been doing this fic, and then I've been like adding to it and putting resi canon in and saying yay or nay about, because she's writing about my characters, my OCs, the alphas. So I've just been like pushing her in the right direction. I don't want to take direction away from her because it's her story and it's looking really good so far. But I have to like put little lore nuggets in there because I'm completely insane. Hopefully that and drawing my characters again is going to give me enough to go on and enough to like keep me occupied for the next what did I calculate it as? 35 days, 10 hours and 3 minutes until the game actually releases. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Maybe I'll come back later and rant a little bit more if I think about anything else. What are your hopes for Resident Evil 8? What did you like about the trailer? What did you not like about the trailer so much? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. What I really want out of doing these sorts of videos is just more interaction with people who are as crazy about things as I am. Like, I love talking about Resident Evil. I take any opportunity and any chance to talk about it. But right now I don't have anybody to talk to it about except for Natalie. So, yeah, tell me what your thoughts and feelings are. For my next video, I was thinking maybe doing a list of top 10 Resident Evil baddies from best to worst in terms of how horrific they were. I was also thinking maybe I could go back to some of my older videos or my older documents that I did. So I did like a review of a couple of Resident Evil games and I planned to turn them into scripts, but I never actually did. But now that I have this nice new camera, maybe I can. So yeah, I'm gonna go now. Try not to fall asleep because I'm always tired. Thanks for listening to me, and I guess I will see you next time. Bye.